Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or discouraged. For the Lord your God is with you. That's what he said. The red dirt cryptid crew is on a mission, headed deep into Dogman territory, so let's roll. Are they paranormal or supernatural or flesh and bone? Who knows? Dogman is a mystery. 9 foot tall, upright canine, it ain't supposed to exist. 500 plus pounds, the mystery of Dogman. Searching for the truth, are they Nephilim agenda? Government, biological weapon, or another of God's creation? Red dirt cryptids, yeah.
All right, what is up, everybody? Coleman here. Welcome to the next episode. This is the second episode of the Dogman Files, this new podcast that we are doing with the guys here at Red Dirt, talking about case files, obviously on Dogman research, Dogman evidence, and things of that nature, essentially. So we are here, and we are here to talk about our next topic. But before we get into that, I just want to clarify something really quick. So, everyone here is a member of Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations. I think maybe there was some confusion on the last episode. We aren't guests of the show. Everyone here is members of Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations. We're all field researchers. We're not guests or anything. We do plan on having guests, obviously, on the show at some point for sure. I know it's something we definitely want to do. Whether it be eyewitnesses or fellow researchers or whatever the case may be. But I do just want to clarify that, so when we kind of talk back and forth and maybe kind of talk over each other a little bit, just understand we're not we would obviously not do that. But this is a discussion type thing. We're kind of going back and forth, sharing our opinions, all that good stuff. So obviously if we had a guest on the show, that's not something we'd be doing. So I think that was kind of a point of confusion on the last episode. So we just want to clarify that. But saying that, like I said, my name is Coleman. Actually, I'm a member and researcher for Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations. We got Eric here, Brian, who is the founder of Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations, obviously. All field researchers, all here to talk Dogman, essentially. So, fellas, let's get straight into the topic for this episode. I had a lot of fun researching this, actually. I've heard about this before briefly, but I never had the opportunity, or I guess the excuse, to really get into, the details and everything of what exactly is going on here in the story and the legend behind this whole thing. But we were talking about the legend of the Kathrine Cross headstone. Now, for anyone who may not know what that is or what we're talking about, essentially. So Kathrine Cross, she was an 18-year-old girl who died back in October 10th of 1917. She died in Konowa, Oklahoma, and that's where her gravestone is. She is buried out in, it is Violet Cemetery. So I'm going based off memory here. She is buried in Violet Cemetery, from my understanding, just outside of town of Konowa. And her gravestone, and the reason why we're talking about this today, is that there is a very odd inscription on the headstone, which reads, quote, "murdered by human wolves." Now, Brian, I know you went out there, maybe a few years ago, maybe something like that. You actually went out there to the cemetery to visit the gravestone. Now, the gravestone was stolen, am I correct? It's not even there anymore.
Yeah. Whenever I was out there, it was gone. People were leaving trinkets and stuff like that. Fun fact, I actually went out there on her birthday. I don't know why. I just kind of felt compelled to go over there. I heard about this years ago. I don't even know how long ago, probably 5-6 years ago. And I was coming back from a camp out with the Native Oklahoma Bigfoot Research Organization, and I knew that it was her birthday because I'd been doing some research on it. And my mom had actually been doing some research because she's a genealogist, and I'd been having her do some work on there too. And my mom had even mentioned that she had a birthday coming up. So anyway, so yeah, I went by there, and it's there's nothing there but the base now.
Yeah, that came up. That headstone came up missing in 2016.
Was it okay?
From what I read,
Right.
I wasn't there.
Well, it had been stolen before,
Yeah.
apparently more than once, but it was returned. So
That's odd. So they're stealing it and returning it? That's interesting.
that happened at least once.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a shame that obviously is happening, people vandalizing and stealing it, but it is a unique. I personally have never heard of anything like that before on a headstone, or even especially like an older headstone. Murder, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's out there, maybe it was common back in the day, but murdered by human wolves. That is a very interesting inscription for sure. So obviously, that's why we're talking about it, is because there are legends, some maybe folklore, if you want to call it that, where people speculate, was she, killed by, werewolves or Dogman or what have you. I know there's a lot of different local legends surrounding that. And I'm researching it. I read a lot of different stuff. It's not just Dogman. There's a lot of weird stuff. Like I said, legends behind why was that put on her gravestone. I have my conclusions from it based off my research. I did a lot of digging on this, and I definitely have my set perspective on what I think is going on with this. But Brian, Eric, which one of you, would like to go first? Kind of share your thoughts on it, researching it, and maybe your conclusions on it, what you think about it.
Well, I'll go first. What happened at the time? A lot of people they blame it on a botched abortion. Early 20th century or 19th, in the early 1900s, abortion was taboo. A single mom, or it just didn't happen there. So these young women would get pregnant, and they'd had to go get that abortion. And it's 1917. The procedures weren't as good as they are now. And what happened was a Dr. A.H. Yates and a Mr. Frederick ONeal. The doctor was a doctor, and the Mr. ONeal was a teacher or a librarian. He wasn't a doctor.
He was a teacher, yeah.
Yeah, a teacher. And something went wrong, and she died. Now, and later acquitted of any wrongdoing. Before this, before Kathrine Cross died on the operating table, a young Elsie Stone was also killed or died on the operating table in August 15th, 1917, for the same reason, getting this abortion. So I would imagine I'm envisioning a young lady on the table, cuts here and there, blood everywhere on her abdomen, and they die. It probably bled out. I think this was before IVs were invented. So I guess maybe looking at the body afterwards, it was attacked by wolves. I don't know where the killed by human wolves came from, other than with the damage that was left behind on their bodies after the botched abortion. But it is a weird thing. Kathrine Cross is the only one with the the epitome of killed by human wolves on her tombstone. So that is weird.
Did any of you guys find anything on where Elsie Stone's grave is?
I could not. I looked a little bit into that. I mainly looked into. I tried to find out more information on Dr. Abram Yates. I was really curious to see what happened to him, and I just could not find anything. Because, like Eric was saying, he was not charged. Him or the school teacher. The school teacher name was Fred ONeal, who was his assistant. From my understanding, they were both no charges. They were arrested. But there was no actual charges brought against them.
To clarify one thing, according to what I heard, they were charged and acquitted of Elsie Stone's situation, and there were charges filed for Kathrine Cross, but that never went to court. So, for the record, they were found innocent of Elsie's death, and charges were never even filed for poor Kathrine. So, you kind of got to take that for what it's worth. I mean, you'd think that, if they were doing something that was illegal, you think they would have been prosecuted and jailed.
So here's so let me read this portion real quick. So I found this, and maybe we can provide the link in the description box for this video, because I think this is very interesting. This is from Substack. The author here, her name is Krista Brown. This was actually a pretty recent article here. It's from February 25th, 2024. Okay, and so she's talking about this case here about Kathrine. And what's interesting is that she talks to a man who's a pastor. I'm not sure if he's still in the town where all this happened at. I'm not sure, but she talks to a man named Scott Cross, an Oklahoma pastor. Now, according to this article, Scott Cross is related to Kathrine. I'm looking at my notes here. Kathrine was the oldest sister of Scott's grandfather. So Scott is a direct relative of Kathrine Cross.
Great.
So, yeah. And so he tells her exactly what happened, and he clarifies everything. So I don't want to sit and read the entire article, but pretty much what happens is she interviews Scott, and what Scott tells her is that she was, and I can't use the word because of YouTube, but she was assaulted by the school teacher, is what, according to Scott. So I also want to point out too, and I think this is important because it gives context to the whole human wolves thing. I found a old newspaper clipping, and I can actually read it because obviously I couldn't memorize the whole thing or anything like that. But it's an old newspaper clipping where they were talking about this case with Kathrine. And so I'm going to read this a little bit. So let's see. So I don't have the newspaper's name. This is another thing we could provide a link for in the description. It's an old newspaper clipping that I found online. There's an image of it. It says Kathrine Cross died October 10th. Parts of her cut out. Information placed in the hands of County Attorney Nicholas led to the subsequent investigation, which, according to the county attorney, developed the fact that the girl would have become a mother within the next 6 months. Yates is accused of attempting to prevent the result. He's said to have coerced Miss Cross into tactic permission by telling her the girl was threatening to unalive herself. So pretty much what that article is saying is, from what I got from it, is the doctor or whoever told Kathrine's mother that she had gotten pregnant because of this assault, and she was wanting to take her life as a result of the trauma. And so some people speculate that he might have lied about that to get to coerce her into allowing this surgery or this procedure or whatever. And so that could kind of go into detail as to why the human wolves thing. It's like not only they take her life, but they lied possibly and all that. So, but here's the really, I mean, this whole thing's very dark, but this is very upsetting. So Local physician, this is back to the article. This is back to the Substack article. A local physician, Dr. Abram Yates, performed the abortion, but then allowed her to bleed out, refusing medical attention. Yates was assisted, says Scott, but by the very teacher who had assaulted Kathrine, who was Fred ONeal. So according to this, because everything, when you read this and all the different articles and websites, they talk about the assistant, the teacher, but this was the first time I'd read this. According to Scott, this relative of Kathrine says that this person who assisted the abortion that led to her losing her life was the person, according to Scott, who had assaulted her to begin with, who got her pregnant. So it's an awful situation, and it does go into detail. If you guys want me to kind of read a little bit more, if you guys want to talk about it more, I can kind of summarize it when you guys are done. But it goes into detail about, and I think you're right, Brian. I think he was ended up acquitted, or the charges were dropped or whatever. It says for ONeal, the jury deadlocked 11-1 for conviction, which meant ONeal went free. So ONeal looks like he unfortunately did not. If it's true what Scott said, I'm going based off what the article saying. It looks like he didn't get convicted or anything like that. So by the looks of it, the two of them kind of got away with it.
11-1 in what fashion?
I for his innocence, I guess, because it said he went free. He wasn't charged. Yeah. As for ONeal, the jury deadlocked 11-1 for conviction. So there was one person who, because it wasn't unanimous, so the one person, I guess, that's how I'm understanding it. 11 of the jury members out of the 12 voted for conviction, but there was one who didn't want to convict him, so he went free.
I did back in 1917, man. People handled things by the feud. If it seems like to me, if he had really done all that they would have had some good old fashioned street justice that night.
A lynching, I think they call it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I have a real issue believing that her parents would allow the guy who assaulted her to assist in this operation. That's the definition of insanity. I don't care how long ago it was. There's no way a parent would allow that or have anything to do with that. Or it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor or what. I have a really hard time believing that. I think we're not being told the whole truth.
I mean, that's kind of what. So that was in regards to when I was talking about earlier, the charges, him not being convicted. That was in regards to the other woman, the other girl who lost her life because of the botched abortion of Stone. So that was also by.
So was Fred ONeal the one that assaulted Elsie Stone?
Yes. Well, so this is what the article says. At trial, friends of Stone testified that she too had been pregnant by ONeal. So, and it says the jury acquitted Yates. It's worth remembering that at the time the jury would have been all male. Oklahoma didn't allow women to serve on juries until 1952. So Yates, this was all for the Stone case. I guess the case for Cross never went to trial, is my understanding. They were too poor. They couldn't pursue legal justice, according to this article. They were sharecroppers, so they never went to trial for Cross. So it only went to trial for Stone, and they could not get the conviction. It was 11-1 for ONeal. So to me, what it sounds like, and it's unfortunate, but to me it sounds like, and this is just going to the details I have, the same thing happened with Stone. Stone was assaulted by ONeal, it seems like. Obviously he wasn't convicted, but it seems like he was assaulted by ONeal. And maybe he had some type of thing going with this doctor or whatever, where he assaulted these women, and then they get pregnant, and then they manipulate the family or whatever to do these procedures, quote unquote, and maybe an attempt to silence them or whatever, oh, it's botched. And because that's kind of, I have a hard time believing that these two were just botched, I think, and I'm speculating there for sure, the speculation, but to me, it's way more than coincidence that this person who's assaulting young women is taken to the doctor, and both of these women pass away from a botched procedure. I don't believe that. I think it sounds like to me that this was kind of an attempt or some type of agreement made with this doctor or whatever to do this.
ONeal was a married man, if I'm not mistaken.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah, and so I could definitely see where you're coming from, but one also has to wonder, what was the success rate or mortality rate of procedures like that back in the day?
Probably very low. I mean, like, Eric brought a good point up earlier. This is back in the day. This was a legal procedure. This was before stuff like this was legal. So obviously they wouldn't. This is more kind of behind the scenes, back alley stuff. It's not done in a sanitary environment, I'm sure, with proper tools or whatever. I'm not trying to be grotesque or, whatever, but it's just the reality of it.
Kathrine Cross didn't die of infection. She died later that day. So.
Well, Cross did not die. No, I think you're confused. That was Stone. I think Stone was the one who later on passed away. Cross hemorrhage and bled out. She, I understand, bled to death.
So it sounds like to me it's pretty clear what happened to Elsie Stone. But what evidence do we have that other than this, this great nephew's statement, what evidence do we have that the same thing, other than hearsay, the same thing happened to Kathrine Cross?
Well, it was put on her. I mean, all the articles I've read have stated. I went to the local publications and newspaper stuff for the town. They've done I mean, I don't want to say lots, but they've done a couple articles on this because this is a popular local legend. And they've clarified and they've looked at death certificates and things like this, apparently. And it's on the death certificate. She died by, let me look it up because the term's escaping me. But they essentially claim that she was, let me look it up. Karen.
Abortions were pretty much illegal back then. So, which drove it underground. So, yeah, the practices weren't refined and always sanitary, and there's numbers between 4% were fatalities up to 42%. Numbers are really unreliable because it was never really it wasn't reported.
Okay.
People just kind of kept that to themselves. But if they did die, it would be listed as a hemorrhaging infections. They'll blame it on some other aspect of the operation. Bleeding out.
Criminal operation was put on her death certificate as her cause of death. Official cause of death recorded on Kathrine Cross's death certificate on her 1917 death certificate is listed as criminal operation. This was a common euphemism used at the time for an illegal abortion.
So it sounds like to me it's a pretty much a clear-cut case for this botched abortion theory that really only leaves one loose end, and that's the epitaph. And why? And how do you go from point A to point B? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. What do you guys think about that?
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I think it was just a words describing what their daughter looked like after the fact. ripped apart by a wild animal. But they weren't wild and they weren't animals, they were humans, so they just associated with a human wolf. But then again, during that time and much before that, there was always rumors, sightings of men with wolf heads, wolfmen, dogmen in that area.
Just being devil's advocate here. How big of a stretch would it be if, say, for instance, she was killed by a cryptid, for them to, document it as a botched medical procedure? It seems like to me it would be easier to document it on paper as a wild animal attack, which is what they do nowadays when this kind of stuff happens. It just seems like to me that if it was a Dogman attack, that it would have just been documented as an animal attack.
Yeah, I agree with that. When it comes to the inscription, I think all that is that it's the family describing the people who took her life. Look at it, like I said, look at the circumstances. If Ron Cross is saying, not Ron Cross, I'm sorry, Scott Cross, I'm sorry. Ron Cross, my bad, sorry. I'm going to edit that out. Scott Cross, if what Scott Cross is saying is true, about, his family and the story and everything, all the details. Obviously the official documented thing, we can pretty much prove that when it comes to she died because of a botched abortion. Of what he's saying is true about the teacher and everything like that, which, if that's really a relative, I would take him at his word, pretty consistently. He's apparently a pastor and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So according to what he's saying, the teacher who assisted in the abortion, who involved this doctor and everything in the first place, was the person who had assaulted her. So, and then according to that news article, or the newspaper headline or article, whatever you want to call it, that I shared earlier that I read off of, according to that, Kathrine's mom was lied to, potentially, saying that Kathrine wanted to take her own life, and so she was manipulated into allowing this to happen, and then it resulted in the tragic loss of Kathrine's life. She was assaulted and she lost her life. I think it's a great way to describe these people who did this to her as human wolves. They are wolves. They are, you have to think too. This is back in the day, the early 1900s. There's a lot of maybe possible religious symbolism there. The scriptures talk about, beware, wolves in sheep's clothing and stuff like this. There's a kind of an allegory there that they're deceiving, that they're evil, that they take the lives of innocent people. So I think that's all the headstone is describing. It's the words from a grieving family who lost their daughter in a horrible, horrible manner by evil people. And so I think that's a fair way to describe it. Murdered by human wolves, I think is what they're trying to say and what they're trying to describe. It's an awful thing. And like Brian, you brought up a good point as well. If this was a cover up, if this was, why would they go? We got covered. She was killed by a cryptid, by a dogman or werewolf or whatever. Botched report, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like they would say, oh, she was killed by actual wolves, she was killed by actual wild animals or something like that. Why would they go pick something as random as a botched abortion? If they were trying to cover it up and make a fake whatever, and just the evidence doesn't support that, in my opinion. So
was there
my thoughts on that?
I didn't find any evidence that where she died. It always referred to a botched abortion, so I assume it was in a clinic or a building or a room somewhere, right?
It doesn't give the exact details. I think from what I read, she died in the town of
okay.
Yeah. From my understanding. But where exactly? There's no town. This was illegal, so
probably would have been in the doctor's office. It just would have been
no. Right. That's what I'm saying. There's no mention of it. It always alluded made you think that it happened in a building or an office of some sort, or in town. What if she was walking into town and someone witnessed a human wolf or two human wolves literally attack her, rip her open, take the fetus or the baby, and run?
I don't know about that.
Right? People come across the body and are like, oh, the baby's gone.
Well, it's not unusual, or maybe, well, okay, to kind of add to what Eric's saying, a lot of animal attacks, they will go for the abdomen because it's the easiest place. There's no bones there. There's a lot of soft tissue there that's easy to rip, and so if they were going after her and they were in a hurry, they could have done that, and but I don't know. I'm on the fence. I mean, part of me wants to believe that it might have had some kind of dogman involved or some kind of lycanthrope or something. But, paper can be manipulated, as we well know. Judges and law enforcement, they don't always necessarily seek out the truth. Sometimes the truth is inconvenient. This was a very small town. I asked ChatGPT what the population of Konowa was in 1920, and it's only 1,400 people. And you got to realize that's everybody with a Konowa address. So, cut that number in half. There's probably 700 people living in town. Everybody else was kind of out in the country. It was a very, very, very small town, and who's to say who was related to who and who was friends with who and who was business partners with who? I mean, small towns are famous for corruption, and people working together against other people. So I would say that it's probably fairly safe to say we don't really know the entire truth. I would say that the great nephew's testimony probably carries the most weight here, but at the same time, families will not necessarily always tell the whole truth, and sometimes they're more than happy to let kind euphemisms or whatnot take the place of truth as far as family lore. But it seems like to me that if you were going to make up a story, you would try to protect Kathrine's her reputation a little bit better, right? But at the same time, they were constantly having to go, like every Memorial Day, they would load up in the wagon or whatever and go to the cemetery to decorate the graves. They had to explain to all the kids and the grandkids why, Auntie Kathrine's gravestone says this, So who's to say how the story changed within the family? But it seems like to me it would have changed some other way other than, oh yeah, she had a botched abortion. I mean, I don't know. To me, the whole thing is just screwy. It's just screwy. And why not monsters? Why not animals, human animals? Why not? There's about 20 or 30 other good adjectives that you could come up with other than human wolves. I don't know. Have you ever noticed that on the pictures of the gravestone, it says murdered, which, by the way, the word murdered is a human word. When an animal attacks something, you were killed by animals. You were not murdered. Murdering is a human attribute. So that's something to take into consideration. But at the same time, why does it say human and then down below, out of place, why does it say wolves? and it's like misplaced on the gravestone. Have you ever noticed that? What do you guys make of that?
Yeah, that is weird. The human will. Why not just murdered by animals or human?
Well, why isn't wolves centered in the center of the text? I mean, wouldn't that make more sense? Why is wolves down below human? And it's not even lined up right. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, it's
like it's an afterthought.
Yeah, or maybe they're just trying to squeeze in human wolves. I don't know. It's very, if it's a mistake, it's a very unprofessional mistake.
Yeah. You think someone maybe later on, years later, they went in there and chiseled in the word wolves?
I kind of doubt it because it looks the same, but I just think it's peculiar, and I don't know if it means anything or not. But that was one of the first things I noticed whenever I saw pictures on her graves on the internet was that, and it seemed very odd to me. I don't think I've ever seen. Now I'm not a gravestone expert or anything, but I've never seen another one that's whopper jawed like that. You know. Now, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Jack Carey did a video several years ago, and he actually mentions that there were other um, gravestones somewhere here in Oklahoma that had killed or murdered by human wolves. And I have dug and dug and dug, and I don't know where those gravestones are. I can't find any report of them anywhere. I don't know if he was misled about that, but I've looked all over. I can't find anything. Um, and it's, to me, that's strange, but it kind of makes you wonder, are they really out there? You know, somewhere in some forgotten cemetery all overgrown or something. I don't know, but I don't think this was a common thing or some kind of fad, but I don't know. You guys go ahead. I'm still confused by this as I was from day one.
Well, my thing is, go ahead, Eric.
Maybe in between our expeditions, or a lot of these cemeteries are not very big. And during the summer months when it's too hot outside to be tramping through the forest, we could be jumping in and out of our air-conditioned vehicles, touring cemeteries and reading headstones, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Might be a thing to do this summer with the kayaks on the roof.
Yeah, I mean, I would not mind, if Coleman was to do some EVP sessions or something, and we can break out some of our ghost hunting gear. But you guys know that's not my cup of tea. But I wouldn't mind. I mean, I think it's probably a really good place. If we were going to do some kind of ghost hunting stuff or something, that would be fine. That would be more up my alley, I would say, than just a random, graveyard. I've also been told, I was listening to, I think a Spooky Okie YouTube channel. They have a little channel too that I hadn't discovered until recently, and I realized that I'd actually met one of those girls at a conference and talked to them. They were actually talking about it too, and they mentioned that there was other murders, like a string of murders that had happened prior there in Konowa, and I'm kind of curious how many people died within a 2-year time frame. I mean, you're talking about 1,400 people in that town, and how many people died within a 4 or 5 year span, and how many of them were murdered? And I mean, we don't really have access to go back and find do research on how many people were murdered in that area. But I think it might be an interesting thing to pay attention to when we're down there, especially, looking at dates. How young were these people? Does the epitaph say anything? Is that common at all to put on someone's tombstone that they were murdered? I mean,
I personally don't know on that one. I mean, the epitaph is definitely interesting for sure. I mean, I think it's unique. I would have to research that and confirm that, because it may not be all that unique. It may be common somewhat, and especially if that was something put there by the family. My thing is this, guys. We always emphasize the evidence. We got to follow the evidence, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
So with this, I believe for sure that there are cases that are odd, that there are details that don't make sense, where I think it is possible where people could have been attacked or whatever by a cryptid or something. I think that's definitely possible. But with this, we got to look at the evidence, okay?
Yep.
We got to look at the documentation. We got to look at all the facts here. Is the epitaph unique and interesting? Sure, it is for sure. But we can't take the epitaph alone and draw a conclusion that says there's this cover up going on where this isn't even like generations ago. I mean, this really wasn't necessarily, historically speaking, in terms of history, all that long ago.
No.
And I mean, we have living relatives today, per that article that we just got done reading from Scott Cross, I believe was his name, who his grandfather was I believe the brother, if I'm recalling this. I mean, so he's closely related to Kathrine here.
Exactly.
So
as close as you're going to get.
Yeah. So as researchers, right, if we were going to interview someone on a more historical cryptid eyewitness sighting, and if someone told us, hey, my grandfather told me stories about his sister had seen this, we would say, wow, that is interesting. That is something to take note of or whatever. And we would document that or whatever. Well, here we have an individual. We have no reason. We have no evidence to present to us, to suggest to us, other than an inscription on a gravestone, to say, that he's lying or anything like that, or that the family adopted the story. I mean, that makes zero sense at all. If they're going to adopt a story to cover this up, first off, why would they put it on the gravestone in the first place? If this is something that the family wants to keep secret, and why would they put and advertise on the headstone, murdered by dogmen or murdered by werewolves, essentially? If that's what was actually going on, that makes no sense. And then later on say, oh, we don't want people to know, so let's say that she was killed by a botched abortion. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so we have to look at the totality of what's going on here. You had a guy, a doctor, a school teacher who was 11-1 convicted, according to that article, or almost convicted, 11-1. One juror kept this guy from going to prison and being charged for assaulting women and having them force abortions and stuff like that. Back in the day, unfortunately, was more common than people think. And it went on a lot more than people realize. And I know we got all the Netflix true crime documentary shows and everything like that, where people years later of all the weird, sketchy shit that went on back in the 70s and 60s and 50s. Well, you best believe, unfortunately, as tragic as it is, this stuff happened back then too. And they happened in small towns and local towns, and teachers and people in power that had access to people and victims and things like this. It's a shame. It is a shame, but we don't have the evidence, in my opinion, and I'm just giving my opinion with you guys, and you guys can feel free to obviously disagree with me. Obviously, we all, just because we're all part of Red Dirt doesn't mean we all look at things the same, and that's what makes things interesting.
Right.
Yeah, we all have different opinions here, but my opinion, guys, I just want to say this. I think we got to look at the evidence here. We don't have evidence other than a strange inscription on the headstone to say that she was killed by dogmen. We just don't have that. We have a lot of evidence and legal stuff and direct word from a closely related family member of Kathrine saying that she's a victim of a botched abortion, and that perfectly, in my opinion, explains the murdered, by, which is another thing too. Someone brought that up. Murdered, right? That's a human thing. If this was an animal attack, quote unquote, I would assume if she was attacked and killed by cryptids, I think it would read like that, attacked, by human wolves or something like that. But no, he murdered by human wolves, murdered by evil men, essentially, is what it's saying. And it's a sad, tragic thing to happen. But like I said, my main emphasis here is I think we just got to look at the evidence. To me, I just don't think we have enough evidence to speculate all this stuff about, well, cover up this and cover up that. If the evidence was suggesting that, if there was details of an attack that weren't lining up with a typical animal attack, like, because we've seen and heard cases like that. Oh, so and so, this person was killed by a domestic dog, and it's the details were like this horrific. There's no way that a dog could have done that. There's no way a bobcat or a mountain lion would have done that. Stuff like that. I think it's definitely safe to say, especially if law enforcement or authorities are acting weird or suspicious. I think we can look at that and say, okay, possible cover up there is something to keep in mind. But something like this, I think we just got to look at the facts here. I mean, we got, like I said, relatives, we got court documentation, we got death certificates. I mean, we got all this stuff saying, and like I said, family is the biggest thing for me that convinced me on this, that I think this is a tragic murder, essentially, is what it is. That's my thoughts.
Well, I agree. I think the real mystery is why they chose what they chose to put on the epitaph. I think it's very strange, and I can definitely see where people would go and jump to conclusions on something like this. But I'm with you there. I just, it's very, I mean, it would serve our purposes to, profess from the rooftops that this was a Dogman attack, but it really just doesn't look like it. I don't think we're ever going to get the answers of why our epitaph reads what it read. And I don't know. I do think it's very strange, but I will concede that I don't think that this was a cryptid attack for sure. But and
it doesn't change the fact, though, and it's something maybe we could go into now. I mean, there are reports of sightings, really interesting sightings that aren't far from this area, from this town.
Konowa is almost a hot spot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot going on over there.
Yeah. So even though this case may be, in my personal opinion, legend, when it comes to the Dogman stuff and I made it clear my thoughts on this case. I think it's just simple legends that have kind of taken things over based off the inscription. But I do think there are, legitimate reports that maybe we can go into a little bit. Eric, do you have some reports from that area or near that area that you wanted to share, possibly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a couple. One was from a couple women who were returning from a bonfire party. I'm assuming there's drinking involved, so let's gloss over that one and go to a school counselor. They had a roadside encounter as he was driving to work one morning. Saw something peer out of the tree line crossing the road. He had a deer in his arm and just stepped over the fence and kept going out into the field. And this happened in 2011. 2011 in southeastern Oklahoma. And I would find it hard to not believe this guy. It'd be easier to believe this guy over a couple party goers from a bonfire party, but
I've been to a lot of bonfire parties and I've consumed a lot of alcoholic beverages over my time. I have detailed experience in this kind of stuff, and I have never had alcohol make me see something like a cryptid. But for the record,
garbage bag blowing across the road.
If anything, I'd be more likely to not notice a cryptid on the side of the road. But the school counselor, I remember that report, and it's kind of one of the most unusual things about that report is you would think somebody in that profession would be extremely reluctant to report something like that based on their occupation and their training and wow, that's really odd.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he said it happened in 2011, and he reported it 2 years ago, in 2023. Maybe he retired and just don't, zero F's to give.
Yeah, well,
He's out in the clear. He's not worried about his career being diminished. And honestly, I think there's that stigma of people labeling you when you talk about it. I think slowly going away. I really do. Thank you, History Channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you guys, I remember a couple of years ago, I was listening to Dogman Encounters Radio, that Vic Kundis show. And I think it was like episode 30, where Gertie, Oklahoma, which is this little bitty tiny town over there that's not far. I think it's east of Konowa, but there was a bunch of boys that were down there playing in the summertime at a creek down there in a bridge, and he was saying that he'd taken his shoes off, and they were down there swimming or whatever, and they all saw this Dogman creature slinking around at the edge, and then it ran across the creek, and I guess they all saw it, and I guess they took off hauling butt, that because they were like a mile south of Gertie, Oklahoma, and I guess they all took off running back up the road, and I guess the boy was pretty upset because he left his brand new shoes up there, and his dad made him go back and get it, and he wouldn't go back. So his dad made him go back and get the shoes, but when they went back, there was nothing there. But that was in 1972. That was quite a ways back there, but that was right there too from that area. So I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting story.
This is interesting. So preparing for this too, I want to talk about this case file. Let me look at the case file number real quick. This is case file number 295. Now this happened in Cleveland County, which is about, I want to say it's about an hour north. Let's see. I think it's northwest, an hour, slightly northwest of the town we were talking about, Konowa, Oklahoma, where the whole Kathrine Cross thing happened. So not too terribly far necessarily. I thought it was very interesting. So this happened back, I believe it was June of the year 2000. And according to the report, it was a young guy. He was over at a friend's house playing video games. And it was getting late, so he decided to leave, and he's walking back, presumably to his home. And on an old, I think it was like an old country road, lots of woods around him, kind of out, middle of nowhere, not on the city or anything like that, obviously. And he's walking to his home. It's late, super late, and he, according to the report, feels like he's being watched. He would turn around, look, he couldn't see anything, but he just felt very unnerved, like he was being watched. And then a car passed him, and when the car passed him, he turned around, and then the headlights of the car that was passing him, he could see off in the ditch near him what he describes as a tall, 8 to 9 foot tall creature with the head of a dog, stalking him, essentially, watching him and following him. He then went to get a police officer because he was obviously terrified, and police officer, because his car broke down. I forgot to mention that his car broke down. He was driving an old car that he, in the report, it was saying that he had a lot of mechanical issues with, and so I guess his car broke down, and that's when he resorted to walking. After that, that's when then the car passed him. He saw the Dogman, and then got the police officer to pick him up and I guess take him home after that. But I thought that report was very interesting as well, for sure.
Huh. Yeah. That's that would be scary as hell to, be hot-footing it like that, and to be putting a stick. I'm not sure where that report originally came from, but I think I've heard that on some YouTube video somewhere. So, but Linda Godfrey, in some of her books, I was always amazed at how many stories that she has that comes through there that came through from Oklahoma. And especially considering, she was from, what was it, Wisconsin or Michigan? She was up there around the Great Lakes and up there in the Beast of Bray Road stuff. And you would think that Oklahoma would be one of the last, places on her radar.
Mhm.
It's like to get reports from. But in her books, I mean, she's constantly referencing Oklahoma. And I remember there was a report from, I think it was Atoka, which is not far from there either, going back east a little ways from. It was 1981, and there was two young men that saw one crossing the road there that she did a write up on, right there by the Muddy Boggy Creek.
Mhm.
And I don't remember exactly what highway it was on or anything like that, but she ended up documenting a lot of cases from Oklahoma, and not just not. I mean, and from all over the state. There were several of them. But no, I don't know. I think that they're all over in that area. I had a guy reach out to me, and I cannot remember his name because it's been a while since I talked to him, but he lived in a small rural community south of Tecumseh, which is down there. And I believe he's claimed that a friend of his, a neighbor, took a picture of a 9-inch canine print. I mean, we're talking like a print like this big around.
Mhm.
And supposedly he took a picture of this, and in this little community, they live out in the country, and there's like a little pond, like a watershed reservoir, and their houses are built on acreages around that. And I guess his neighbor was out. The water level was real low on the pond, and I guess it was in the middle of the summertime. And he was walking his dog around on the edge, and he found this print, and he took a picture. And this was 7 or 8 years ago, and he took a picture of it with his flip phone,
Mhm.
And he showed his buddy, and then then they started hearing about Dogman. And there was like, oh, and then it's like, well, what happened? Well, that phone got destroyed. Something happened to it. The classic story, fell in the toilet or something, and I lost all my photos. I mean, we've heard all this stuff. It's what happened to a lot of evidence from that era.
Yeah.
Well, it was so hard. We didn't have iCloud back then, so yeah. Well, I mean, I've had a lot of good pictures that got ghosted whenever I jumped in a swimming pool with my phone in my back pocket.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, but there was that. I had a lady reach out to me that claimed that she lived in. I think it was. No, it wasn't Konowa. It was maybe it was Tecumseh. And I went out and looked at her family owned a house right on the edge of town, and I actually did a video on this one, and I it's over there by it's east and south of Shawnee. I want to say it was Tecumseh, but I went over there, and she owned a house that was there. Her and her mom owned a house that they had inherited from their grandpa. And they basically, both of them were renting places in town because they refused to live in the house.
Mhm.
And they let me go over there and do like a little inspection. But apparently they had multiple encounters in there with not only Bigfoots, but dogmen too, coming up into town, going in through their trash and getting in their trash cans. And
Mhm.
to me, that story was so odd. But the weirdest thing is these people were paying money to rent houses, at a different location in town. when they had a free house there. It was it was a 2-story, like 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. I mean, it was a little, ramshackle, but it was paid for. It was free.
Right.
And they were choosing not to live there because they were tired of things looking in their windows and getting on the roof and doing all this weird, creepy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Even the grandfather, the girl's grandfather, apparently one night he stepped out on the back porch and had a face-to-face with one, and it scared him pretty bad. So, but he never would tell anybody what he saw. But apparently it was pretty obvious that we'd had some kind of, face off with something that just, because if it was a man, he would have called him out,
That's terrifying. I could not imagine. Yeah, I mean, not to get too off topic, but I mean, thinking about that and thinking about, what we were just talking about earlier, kind of the Basters video, the Kathrine Cross thing. It does make me curious and does make me want to look more into older cases, early 1900s, late 1800s. It makes me curious to see if we could find cases that maybe do have some more legitimacy in regards to the possible cryptid connection that we could make, and to see how they're reporting that, to see what exactly the newspapers are saying in situations like that. Are they just reporting animal attacks? Are they what are they saying exactly? Could we find certain connections there with mysterious unexplained animal attack based deaths in small towns and local areas like that back in the day, and see how they're reporting it and see how they're discussing it? I think would be very interesting to see how people, especially back then, I mean, we always talk about how people back decades ago, Eric brought this up earlier, kind of the stigma, from, I mean, even not that long ago, before the subjects are getting, when I say subject, I'm talking about cryptids in general, got more popular, and it's still weird. There's still somewhat of a stigma, I think, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as it used to be, for sure. When you hear stories of, not even that long ago, I mean, people being afraid of losing their jobs and their careers and their reputation for talking about their encounters and stuff like that. I mean, imagine how much even more so back then, know.
Well, and then there's the whole nut house thing where they used to lock people up in insane asylums and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the stories that came out of those places, and your family members, if they would lock you up, and claim that you were crazy. All they had to do is pay off the right doctor. I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares, so your mental sanity back then was extremely important to people. Go figure.
Today they just give you pills and
Yeah.
send you on your way. You're good.
Yeah, people pay good money for those pills.
Or do you think do you guys think, I mean, and I'm just throwing this out there, I don't know. I mean, do you guys think it's a possibility that maybe back then, right? Because I would have to imagine people back then would probably look at that, and I'm just speculating here, I don't know this for sure, from a more maybe religious perspective, I mean, back then, very, very Protestant, possibly, especially in the South or whatever, close to it back in the day. Would people look at, if they were having Dogman sightings, where, a canine upright, werewolf essentially type looking thing, would they, back then, specifically late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, would that be kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, like a Salem witch trial type thing? Like, would they look at that as sort of like a demonic thing or something? And I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there as like, what narratives would they, if this was really going on in a small town back then, what kind of narratives would you see, and what would you expect to find or see or hear people talk about? How would we expect them to talk about this? So we could kind of have things to look for, so to speak, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I agree with you. I think that anything, with, that looks something like this thing behind me would have just been labeled demonic. And the general consensus back then is is if you're having demon problems, it's because you did something to bring them to you. And, so I would say that people would go to great lengths to hide, something like that. And sadly, the easiest thing would usually be to move.
Yeah.
To leave town, to get the hell out of there, And as we know that once you've seen something like this, your eyes are open, and you start looking even to the new place that you go, and eventually you end up seeing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah, once they think you're weird, they get great ideas. Like they'll dunk you in water. If you drown, you're not a witch.
who can argue with that logic? Oh man, yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, I would say that based on the Salem witch trials and stuff, which, by the way, was supposedly due to some natural form of LSD that was growing on their bread. So as long as nobody's been eating any mold, I don't know. I mean, things get out of hand, and people are crazy. And who do you go to when you've had one of these encounters? Like I've said before, you can't go and talk to your priest. Back then they didn't have counselors. You damn sure don't go to the bar and tell the bartender what you thought. I mean,
well,
what do you do?
After you get your drink, you tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was just drunk. Messing with everybody. Yeah. And then hopefully somebody come to you later and say, "Hey, by the way, was you serious about that?" But
I do think it's interesting just to think about that, because like I said, if we were to, for research to try to dig in deeper and find, stuff like this that may have more evidence backing it up that could actually be cryptid related, older cases, which I just think older cases like that are very interesting to me. I don't know why, but people back then seeing something like that and it's being documented, I think I don't know. I pay attention to stuff like that. And so I do kind of think because it's not going to be reported, especially back then. I don't think, maybe as a werewolf probably, but they're not going to say Dogman sighting or something like that. So, I kind of have to think how would they describe it? And how would they talk about it? How would they discuss it? And I think about if there was a small town in Oklahoma, like Konowa or something similar back then, and they were having Dogman sightings or attacks or whatever, how would they describe that? How would they based off the context back then, how would they react to that? How would they perceive that? How would they even interpret that? So I think that would come through in publications and newspaper stuff, whatever, and legends, so that's kind of my gist of where I'm kind of going with that one, I guess. But I do think it's interesting for sure.
it is. It's very fascinating. People back then, they lived completely different lives than we live today. So it's ridiculous to expect them to interpret things the way we would interpret them. Mm-hmm. And, I know for a fact that, you take Halloween, for instance. Back when I was a kid, Halloween was great. We used to go door to door and knock on strangers' doors and just have faith that the candy that they were giving us wasn't poisoned or didn't have razor blades in it and stuff like that. But once word got out, once everybody heard one thing that changed everything, and now, you have to go, the only acceptable candy that you can get is from a church parking lot now. Apparently that makes, because there are no weirdos at the trunk or treat.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Apparently that candy has the blessing of the Lord.
Nothing could go wrong there. Yeah.
Why? You want Halloween back? Slip some poison in it. Trunk or treat. We'll get our Halloween back. But that's a whole nother podcast. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, I really enjoyed this. This was fun. And, poor Kathrine Cross. I mean, my heart goes out to her. I mean, what a way to go. And that's tough. And it just kind of goes to show you, that you never know what can happen, And so, life is short, make the most of it, and live every day like it's your last, I guess. I don't know. Some of us are blessed with more years than others.
Yeah, I mean, to give my final thoughts on it, I mean, God rest Kathrine Cross's soul. That's an awful, horrible tragedy. What happened? It goes without saying. It's terrible. It's terrible that things like that happened back then, and they unfortunately happen now. People being victimized by monsters. And it's just horrible. So definitely a lesson to be learned there for sure about being aware of how people can abuse positions that they're in to hurt people, like we were kind of reading about with that article, and being aware of the evil people are capable of, honestly, to really put it plainly, and just be aware. But yeah, I mean, God rest her soul. And I will say too, though, I think cases like this are important to look at, because this is not an outlier. This is not this is not something unique when it comes to the cryptid stuff. You have lots of legends, and you have lots of stories of, this happened, and whatever, and they say this happened, and they say that this person saw this or was attacked by this, and all this stuff. There's lots of stories like that that you have to look into and research, and I think this is good. I'm glad we did this, because it's showcasing the importance of doing research, and trying to separate the fact from fiction. And I think we did a good job of doing that tonight, with separating fact from fiction, getting to what does the evidence say, and things like this. So that way we can figure out what's more so legend, but what's more so, hey, like there's something to this possible encounter, there's possible story, or whatever of cryptid related and stuff like that. We have to, and Brian, I know you're big on it too. The fiction stuff. We gotta get away from the fiction. We gotta focus on what's real. In this stuff, because there's so much fiction out there. For us to actually learn and figure out, get any type of semblance of what's going on with this cryptid stuff, with the Dogman phenomena. We can't be looking at fake stories and stuff like that, and trying to, we gotta focus on what's real and try to get information based off that. And so we can do that by doing what we did today, giving our opinions on this and giving our perspectives and trying to get to the truth. So that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah. People should strive to be a real researcher and do a better job. And, instead of just gobbling up the creepypasta and just running with it, I mean, it's real easy to just be a consumer. Sometimes you got to dig in. I kind of fell into it at first too. But I would say that my opinions have changed over the years. I try to look a little bit deeper. I'll be honest with you. When I first started looking into the whole Kathrine Cross thing, I didn't have AI to help me research. And it has proven to be a very valuable tool. And it has possibly even changed my mind about what I think about, this particular situation. So, anyway.
Eric, you got any final words?
No, not on this topic.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll do the outro, I guess. So, thank you everybody for watching. Definitely put your comments down below. Let us know what you think about this case. If you agree with us or disagree with us, do you think this is possibly cryptid related? Do you think it's not? Share your perspectives. Maybe give some ideas of cases you think are cryptid related that are maybe kind of similar to this. I would be really interested in hearing about that for sure. Maybe give us some ideas of future topics and cases we can kind of dissect and get into for future episodes. I know I had a great time researching this and looking into this, and I would definitely like to do it again and find cases that could very well be, cryptid related. I think that would be fascinating to see and look into that. So, like I said, share your comments, share your thoughts, share your opinions down in the comments below. Make sure you like the video, do all the good, YouTube stuff, subscribe, share the video with your friends, whatever. We plan on obviously doing a lot more of these and covering future case files here in the future. So stay tuned for that. My name's Coleman, here with Eric and Brian. I guess we'll see you guys later.
Well, this is a picture of that missing headstone. One of the relatives went out to see it a couple weeks ago. That's when they realized it was missing. All that is left of the gravesite of Kathrine Cross is the base of her headstone after someone recently took it.
I think it's real disgusting to anybody to be involved in taking headstones that have no connection to them.
John Myers is the nephew of Miss Cross. He says that Cross died in 1917 when she tried to get an abortion. That's why her tombstone says, murdered by human wolves.
My grandfather was probably trying to find some way to reveal his feelings about the doctor who performed it. And the only way he could do that was to compare him to some animal that would be vicious.
Police say the tombstone has been taken multiple times. The last time they recovered it in the ditch not far from the cemetery. Myers just wants the headstone put back where it belongs.
If it was anybody's headstone, I'd feel the same way. I just don't think those things ought to be desecrated that way.
Crystal Price, KOCO.
The Lord has got us six, he told me fear not. Time to walk the walk, red dirt, cryptids digging in deep. The witnesses ain't all wrong, swimming in a sea of conspiracy.